Thank you. Thanks, Audrey. And again, a warm welcome to you all. And I've been coaching now, I can say, for 20 years. This year's 20 years. Learning about coaching, and I am still amazed how much there is to still learn. And so the more I learn about coaching, I realize that it's an infinite subject, because the subject we deal with is a person that's infinite, and they're always changing. So we never arrive, and we never believe that what worked with the previous mentee or coachee will work with the one you're currently working with. So it's a continuous journey. That's why we need tacit knowledge. It's knowledge that you can't really study. It's you gain it as you move and as you work. So to our friends from different parts, or different countries, different cities, from DRC to Sweden, Cape Town, Johannesburg, a warm welcome. We learn together. And maybe you're not actively coaching today, but I believe that we are all mentors, whether you like it or not. People look up to you. People draw knowledge from you. They ask you questions, and that's an opportunity for you to respond. So we are preparing for our Swedish Winter Challenge that will happen in January, on the 17th of January. And if you'd like to be part of that, maybe a table host or to assist in any way as a trained coach, please let me know. But if you would like to sit in on the training and be part of the Winter Challenge and that experience, it will be online for 22 again. You please accept this as your invitation, right, Jenny? They're all invited to
Absolutely.
be part of it. So Jenny leads us and generally hosts us with the Swedish team in Sweden every year. And somebody came to me this week from South Africa with their passport and said, "Are we going to the Winter Challenge in January?" I said, "Yes, but you're not going to need your passport. You're just going to need data for the next one." So hopefully the 2023 will be a physical one in Sweden. Let's kick off today, and I'm going to ask a question. We spend lots of money on strategy and strategic documents. And if you've ever done work with any government or corporate entity, they would have strategic documents. What do you believe is the problem why those strategic documents are never implemented? Just comment a word or two from anyone. You can just put your mic on and say, "I believe why strategic documents are not implemented is because."
Charles?
Yes.
I think the answer is in just the structure of your sentence. It's a document. We might even attach it's a document that sits somewhere in a folder or a cabinet. We might even attach a working document, which makes it more active. And I think you're the first proponent to that. Instead of just talking about strategic planning, let's evolve to strategic thinking. So it needs to be a thinking habit.
Right. Thanks, Al. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think Alistair is on something, but I also think that I did the Strengths Finder test recently, And interestingly, number one strength in my life is strategies. And it said this is something you cannot learn. I'm not sure that you can't learn it, but strategic thinking is something that's a part of us maybe. But what's really interesting, I think, is that I've been pondering a lot lately, is that understanding your why. That it means what's really driving you, what makes you, this thing that goes into the part of the brain that we're not dominated by your logical thinking. If you don't have that force, so to speak, strong enough, you don't know why you want to do this, follow this strategy, then I think often why that's the reason why it fails. People don't have the motivation, the real motivation for the hard work.
Thank you, Daniel. Motivation. Pierre, the last masterclass took us through lean and the principles of lean and getting things done. Pierre, you have huge context when it comes to strategy and implementation in different countries. Why do you think what's the main thing in your head why we don't implement strategy?
Well, I don't have an opinion in terms of government. There are keywords that cross my mind in terms of lack of competency, probably, and lack of realistic plans that can't really be implemented, maybe, because there's too much political bias. But I'm not too sure about that, because I've never worked. I've worked for government organizations, but not enough to have an opinion on that. From a business viewpoint, I think is the way you deploy your strategy has to do with the engagement of top leadership with the subordinate, and to have a two-way conversation. So implementing a strategy can't be top down. There must be a bottom-up conversation that needs to happen, and it can't be imposed, because it has to be realistic. So if the strategy, and I assume you're talking about business strategy, which is, how do we satisfy a particular class of customers, then it's actually the people in the organization themselves that are going to create that value for the customer. And they need to be part of the conversation of co-creation of the strategy. I think that's critical. And then after that, if the information is moving bottom up, then there's a realistic view of how we're going to actually implement that. And then you start to break down the 1 or 2 or 3 strategic objectives of things that are actionable at departmental level. What does that strategy at business level means for me in my department? What do I need to do to support that strategy from a people, from a process, from an equipment viewpoint? I don't know if it helps.
No, great. I hear the lean thinking coming through once again. I think if we're going to draw blood from Pierre, it's going to come out with lean methodologies. So thank you, Pierre. And anybody else you want to add? We're learning together. I know many of you are working in different contexts. We've got Rudy online. He is working with a bunch of architects and town planners. They plan everything. So Rudy, planning and implementing are 2 different things.
My wife kind of always talks about, she says, the difference between an idea and a strategy is people think they have a nice idea, but the strategy is something that looks and feels very, very different in terms of getting something done and implemented. And we see this within the city of Cape Town currently in terms of how they are looking at, they've got all of these layers of spatial visions and frameworks and stuff. And when it actually hits the ground, it's fragmented. And it's because people are working within silos. And there's nothing that moves between the different silos to actually get things done. And I think we've, in the context of building, you do find that when you take a building process and you kind of create silos within which certain components like roads and open spaces and communities and housing and these things live, that you really struggle to get things done on the ground because you've fragmented the entire strategy. So it's a way within kind of corporate and local government structures where we've kind of almost broken it into chewable chunks. But within that, we've somehow lost the ability to actually hit the ground. So yeah, if that makes any sense.
Great. No, it does. Makes a lot of sense. That's why we're having load shedding at the moment. Silos are not talking to each other. And so there are a number of reasons why there's no implementation. And I'll post in the chat. Intention does not change anything. Implementation does. Everybody, whether it's government or in corporate circles or in business or even on the Zoom today, we have good intention. We woke up this morning with really good intention, but we'll go to bed tonight unless we implemented the thoughts and ideas we had waking up. There would be no change. So the key to having good intention materialize is implementation. Now, Bintu in DRC added, she said, sometimes the text doesn't match the reality on the ground. And that is so true in Africa. We have lots of consultants coming in and writing the text and the strategy documents, but they have no real context for what's happening in the local context. She also said experts create books, but do not study the feasibility. So thank you, Nabintu. I want to summarize almost 20 years of coaching in a picture for you. And for those who have done our training, this will be a refresher. For those who haven't done, you will have another opportunity at the Winter Challenge to get into that. But I want to share my screen and just show you some pictures. So let me see if I can get this right. Great. So do you just see one picture in front of you, or do you see all my screens?
One picture you already, Charles?
Ah, fantastic. I'm so glad you don't see my bank account up here or anything else that's on my screen. So today we really want to talk about the art of implementation, because it's a real art. You can learn strategy, you can learn strategic planning, but you can't learn strategic thinking. And that's the art behind implementation that makes it's when you can think implementation and strategy, then you know you're on the road. So this is a whole picture. I'm going to start on the left-hand side of the screen with number one, which is, where are you? We need to find out where are we currently. And I call this, and in our training, we call this the now. What's the current now situation? And I made up an acronym called SCORE to help us determine the now. So if you're working with somebody, you need to allow them. This happens. Every part of this model works in conversation. Doesn't work in teaching. It doesn't work in instruction. It works through dialogue and conversation. So we have the now conversation with somebody. So we have Maria online as a director of a company working with staff. You need to ask them, where are you now? What are the current realities? So the SCORE stands for, what are the strengths? What do you have in your hand? Or if you're working with a person, what are you good at? Then I like the question, what are you called to do? what's your calling in this company? What is your calling? What are you excited about what you are called to do in this business? In life, this is a big word called calling. You know, whether you live your life short term or with eternity in your heart, there is a calling on every single person. I like people say, oh, I have this calling, but we forget every single thing that moves in the world has a calling. There's a design and a purpose for it. So what is that? Then what opportunities are there for you with that calling? And the worst thing is to be called as a musician, to be stuck under a car as a mechanic. Yeah, you have tension then in your calling versus what you're doing in your life. And there are so many people that I work with in mentoring and coaching that have an idea of what they're called to do, but their opportunities and the things they are busy with, they detest. I've coached executives who hate what they're doing simply because they're forced to do it. It puts money in the bank and food on the table. But the work you're doing must line up with your calling. And these are big questions. And that's probably Audrey's favorite question when she sits with anybody. It's to help them understand that. So what, if you're called, what opportunities are there? And there's always an opportunity for a calling. Once you find your calling, opportunities find you. The reason why you miss opportunities is because you don't know your calling. When you're grounded in, this is what I'm called to do. I'm called to be a teacher. It's amazing how many opportunities will then come to find you as a teacher. So if you're a called architect, you would not need to advertise, because the opportunities will come knocking on your door because that's your calling. So when you get into that space, you will see how calling and opportunities work together. I've been mentoring and coaching professionally for 20 years. And about 5 years into that business with Rainier, we decided to do some advertising. So we printed brochures and we printed leaflets and we were going to distribute it. And we printed quite a lot and we distributed quite a lot. But we never got one hit from that advertisements. We put it in magazines and we did it all over. But we weren't grounded in our calling to work with leaders. We just thought we're going to start this mentoring and coaching business and we're going to run now and just, and when we started talking to people about mentoring and coaching, they didn't even know what it was. They thought we were sports coaches. So when we understood our calling, that we called to work with leaders, and we found that leaders came to look for us. I don't know if that makes sense to some of you. We live in a tough economic environment right now. And the first thing people start to do when it's tough is they start to look for more opportunities. And I'm not telling you not to advertise. I'm not telling you not to use your advertising agency. What I'm pointing at is, please be grounded in, this is what I'm called to do. It's what I'm supposed to be doing. And I really have the strength for this. I have the gift set for this. The opportunities will come to you. Then we ask, what are your realities and what are your current realities? Tell me about it. Then we ask our clients, what are your endeavors? What are your dreams? What do you want to achieve? What responsibilities do you currently have? What do you want to achieve with that? So this happens in conversation. Doesn't happen in teaching, it happens in drawing art. So a coach and a mentor is like a fisherman. He's throwing questions, which is with bait on it, and you're pulling it in, and you're pulling out the person's true identity and their belonging and worth. You're drawing that out through conversation and dialogue. Any questions on the now? Any comments, any additions? So please, there are some very experienced mentors and coaches on this call. You're welcome to add, can say this worked for me in the now. You could do a SWOT analysis, you could do a PESTLE, you could do a SAW analysis, but it must happen in conversation. Jenny, your mic is off. Did you want to add something?
I think it's really helpful to have a map like this, to put in the different tools for different purposes. It helps, when working with companies, if the vision and goals are not aligned with the core purpose of the company, or if the core purpose has not been identified, it's close to impossible to tap all the potential in the company or in the initiative. And I was thinking about what you said, Rudy, about the not implementing when people don't talk to each other, the power of getting those arenas together where we can share the goals and vision and disregard from the differences. But I have exactly the same experience, that it's so hard to get ownership when, especially in the public sector, where there is no ownership for the development, just for the tiny piece that their responsibility lies today. And sometimes within organizations that can be the same, if the culture does not provide the interconnectedness between people. And that is the resistance on the health and, for example, in the company, the working climate.
So true, Jenny. So I told you we have got smart coaches on this call. So we have to learn together, and this communication, being able to talk. Yeah, as South Africans and Africans, one of the biggest learning for me in working particularly with Sweden and Europe is in Africa, we hit our way out of a problem. And it's, as a child, you got corporal punishment at school. They hit the knowledge out of you. And so that gave us the fear of talking. We don't talk easily. And in Sweden, their children, when they misbehave, they talk to them. And it was a huge learning for me to watch parents speak to their toddlers and speak to their children and hold them when they misbehave. So I know this is foreign to the Swedes on the call, but part of our mindset is when there's a problem, we don't talk. We hold it in, and we need to look good and be good to fix it. But I've come to learn to actually start to force myself to talk and to talk it out. So Jenny's absolutely right. The communication, that's why a big part of our training is communication. The second jump that we make is when the person's talking about the now and the things they're dealing with, we jump into the where, which is the next part. And I don't know if you can see that. So The way deals with what's the vision? And a simple way of defining vision is, what do you want to become and what do you want to make of the environment around you? Paint that picture for me. So who do you want to become? Not what do you want to do, it's who do you want to become and what do you want to make of the environment around you? So what does that look like? That is a useful way to define vision, because I've listened to companies and I read their vision and mission and purpose statement, and it's just a mess. When you get your mission as a vision, you're going to be very unhappy. You will be a human doing instead of a human being. But vision is, who do you want to become? Who do you want to be? And what do you want to make of the environment around you? Then we ask, so what goals do you want to achieve? And we make them SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, resource, time framed. And I ask, in that vision, what values will be important to you? Those values are those core beliefs that you have. So what core beliefs will be lived out in the way, in that vision? So values there are some from companies here, and the value statement of the company means very little pasted on the wall. It means a whole lot when the person who cleans your factory floor lives out the values of the company. So that's the where. So I want to ask, is there anything, I just defined vision very briefly. Goal setting is a whole subject on its own. Core values. Is there anybody, one of you, that want to add anything to this in the way? What's worked for you? What didn't work? Anything that you struggle with? And you're welcome to add. Oh, if you're posting in the chat, unfortunately, I haven't learned that skill to read my chat while I'm presenting. So Audrey, if you can, I know Nabento is not on a mic, so if there is a chat comment, if you could read it. In the where. So we move from now to where. We don't ask, oh, this person has a problem, and we try and solve it. We move from, you have an issue, where are you heading? So those are the two important steps in strategic thinking. Strategic planning deals with now, how are we going to unpack the now, what goals do you want to set? So it's more planning around achieving and around problem solving, whereas strategic thinking always thinks through the way, through the future. Or I like to put it this way, thinking through eternity. Any addition, any questions?
Well, there was a comment from Pierre. He said regarding purpose, if you don't know where you are going, every road will lead you there. And also said, who do you want to become is not the same as what do you want to do.
Beautifully said. So
sorry, Charles, can I
Yes.
add something? I also find that, and when we do a precinct and we design something, we always talk about what is, which is the current context, which is probably your now. and what should be in terms of where you are going, then you usually go through a planning process, which takes anything between 5 to 10 years, and then you start building it, the local landscape in terms of decision makers who approves things changes, the market changes, everything changes in between. So I think, it's almost that, and we've seen this with larger development precincts where things have substantially changed and it did not look the same as we initially envisaged it. So I think part of that process, there's always a gap between now and where you are going. You don't just one day step, you don't just step from the one into the other. So I think it's also, how do you implement something and look at it quite realistically in terms of this process and the move between, because there might be anything from a number of months to kind of a lifetime between these two areas. So you constantly move. It's almost like you're growing an influence in a certain area, and you learn how to design something or kind of implement something which can accommodate change, but still holds the integrity of what you initially conceived. So I'm talking about a thing, but I think for us as people or clients that we mentor, it's the same process. Is that there's usually a vacuum between the two. So if you are called to kind of work with communities on grassroots level, but you are finding yourself of certain cultural thing, or you don't have access to that, then you will have to find another way of doing that. And I think that's where these kind of bouncing the ball around and helping people to get into that. So there are certain things that you will have to overcome, and you will have to grow an influence in certain areas for you to step into your way. So it's helping people to kind of navigate through that transition process, because it can be quite a lengthy process.
Wow, that's brilliant. So you actually grow into your way. So if you're ever wondering why you're not there yet, it's because you still got some growing to do. Thank you, Rudy. That's some beautiful insight. Let me jump into the how, if there's no further comments, or you can, I don't mind you speaking over me. So if I'm talking and you want to say something and I don't see your hand or see the screen, please feel free to just start talking and I will stop.
One comment from Nabintu. She said, I've been learning about the pitfalls that you meet in the journey between the now and the way. This course stated, the trap of fatality. In Africa, there are so many misfortunes that seem to be waiting in the way to get our projects down. How do you get through? Are there strategies that you can suggest specifically to sub-Saharan Africans?
Wow, Nabintu, that's why we have this circle looking at us. And I borrowed this diagram from a tool. Jenny, what's the tool called? Lars taught it to us. Nura or something.
Yeah, it's Swedish. Nara.
Nura.
The now and the wished future state, hindrances, resistance, and activities.
Yeah. So he presented this in one of the board meetings, and I thought, that tool just is such a beautiful picture with this circle that crosses, because it's exactly what Nabintu is saying, that we know our current context and we do have a vision and a hope and we know who we want to become, but it's in the detail that it's that curve, where we miss the now. So what is that curve, Nabintu? The first thing is really, see, even Audrey smiled. She realized that Charles did something creative on PowerPoint. And the first thing is in the how is you must know what's resisting you, or what is the resistance. And I call that the schlep. I don't know if in other countries you have that word schlep. Schlep just means it's hard, it's difficult, it's a challenge for us. So what's the schlep? And it's again conversation. What Nabento social issues are resisting you? What are the health issues that you need to consider? What legal issues are resisting? Then what economic issues? In Africa, this is what we deal with, the reality of economic issues. So what exactly is the economic issue that's resisting that way? Because, you know, it can be $10, it can be $1 million, but what is it exactly? You have to know what's the size of that resistance. Then what are the political things that's resisting you? What are the considerations politically? And then to the people that's in your team or the personal hindrances, what's resistance are you having to deal with in yourself or in your team, if there's a team? And these are the conversation points that helps then measure the resistance, because no one builds a house without finding out the cost first. So if you're going to go to the where, you need to know what's going to cost me. What's the resistance I'm going to need to overcome? So that schlep tool will help you with the conversation, and the coaches here will add to that. Yeah. Then we ask, what resources is now needed in the how to achieve this where state, who we want to become? What finances, what tools, what team needs, what physical needs are there? What resources do we need in place? It's in the how. So this forms a very big part of your planning and your how. The question, the hard question to ask is, what is the results you want to achieve? So you have resistance. What resources do you need in place? And then when you consider those two things, what results do you have? What's the absolute minimum result that you can achieve? What's the immediate thing that you can do? What's the ideal that you want to achieve? And then what's the middle? So there's the minimum, there's the ideal result you want, and then there's the middle. What can you do right now? And that's when we start to push the organization or the individual towards some change and some action by asking them, so what result? And we record that in the action sheet. The fourth part of the how and this change process, we need a communication plan. And that means, how often are we going to meet? When are we going to meet? What are the meetings going to look like? What's the agenda going to be? Who is going to talk about what? If it's a mentoring session or a coaching session, we set up a schedule. When are we going to meet? How often? How long are those sessions? What do we need for that? And then we come back, and those meetings are primarily to review the results that we wanted to achieve. And it's then to review, has those resources come in? Are we still chipping away at those resources? And are we overcoming the resistance? So the review process is key. Any questions on that? Nabento, I hope that helps. If you want to talk to me more offline, you're welcome to do that. I would say I will come to DRC, but next year. Any additions, any questions before I start to wind up with the toolbox.
Can I add something, Joel? Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, resources is an interesting thing, especially in the context of Africa. And I think, you know, for those who have been trying to implement projects in Africa, or even South Africa, you know, the availability of resources is one of our primary hiccups. I think what we've learned is that, you know, that once you start with an idea or a process or a project, is that you need to have an understanding of the context that you are going to be operating in, and you need to review your plan and scale it accordingly to the resources that's available, so that you don't come with a grand plan and then realize it actually that you can't implement it. It's interesting. Yeah. My wife just came back from Botswana, and to launch a specific product there. It's a medical process, and the Ministry of Finance have basically said to them that before they implement anything, the Minister of Finance needs to have a costing model of exactly what it takes to implement this specific product, the impact of that on the clinics, the cold chain, the entire system, the callbacks, the entire model needs to be done before they will actually activate it. Which is interesting, that they realize that if they do not understand the full chain, the full kind of cost implication of that on their budgets as a health ministry, that they might not be able to implement everything. They might be able to only implement certain aspects of it. Yeah. But I think, you know, we always have this grand plan of we're going to change this, this, and this, but sometimes we just need to have small participatory things in certain communities that is doable, and that starts in the smallest possible way, or, you know, the smallest possible change, but that would do it in the biggest possible way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, thanks, Rudy. I find that this tool, the Aim Smart under results, is very useful, because we ask, you know, what is the immediate step? What's the absolute minimum? What's the intermediate or the ideal, that you want to achieve? So what is the absolute minimum thing that you can do to affect change? And then what is the ideal? We want to vaccinate the entire country. But then what is the reality? What's the middle? What's the immediate thing that you can do now? And that's when reality sets in. So we call that Aim Smart when you're setting goals. Great. I want to just whet your appetite. If you've never gone through our toolbox, or would like to know the toolbox, for those who have done the training over the years, you would remember I'm going to show you the toolbox now. How do we apply our tools as coaches in this? So, great. So in the now, we have to start with brainstorming. We have to mind map that, and we have to record it in an issue sheet. So for the coaches that have done our training, you would know exactly what I'm talking about. For those who are new, brainstorming, there are two important requirements for brainstorming. It's a blank sheet of paper and a brain. Right. So you need two things. And you take out the thoughts and the key thoughts onto the paper, and we mind map that. And we then link the thoughts together through mind mapping. And we train this. And when there are core issues that come out in the now, don't solve it. Please don't just try and fix things. Record it, write it down. I'll give you a tip to sleeping well at night. When you wake up with an anxious thought on your mind, write it down and go back to sleep. Because if as long as you're thinking about it, it stays in your head. But when you write it down, if you're like me, you sleep with a notebook or an iPad next to your bed. And when you wake up with these crazy thoughts or these ideas or anything that makes you anxious or anything that makes you excited, you write it down at night. And for us as coaches, we record these things in what's called an issue sheet. We write down the issues. Right. Then we go into the where. So now, and then we jump to the where, the vision, goals, values. And the toolbox that we use there, we do the blue sky thinking, where we ask the question, if there was no limitations, no financial constraints, no health issues, what picture would you paint? What would the vision look like without any constraints? And that's blue sky. So we all know the feeling of seeing a blue sky. I know what that feels like in the Swedish Winter Challenge, when the sky opens up and it's -10 degrees and the sky is blue. It's the most amazing feeling that you have. It's light. You actually feel like the mad cows, like just running around when that happens. So when you blue sky a vision, you will see the person you're working with or the company you're working with, they become very excited, because vision always excites. And when you remove the complaints and all the constraints, it's a place to dream, and we call that blue sky. We then take it into a project sheet where we record what are the SMART goals, what do you want to achieve, what do you want to do in the future, and we record that in our project sheet. So that's the compass where we're heading. We also, the way needs to be built on a foundation, and those are the core beliefs or values. And we have a values exercise. So for our coaches, you take out your values exercise and you do that in the where. The next step is there's the disconnect that we all spoke about, and we heard some of you talk about, between the now and the where. And what is that? How do we measure that disconnect? We use the tool called the DVP. And it measures the cost of change. What's the level of dissatisfaction? How clear is the vision? And what is the level of planning? And that's a formula that we use. So this is a recap for some of you. And if a lot of this is new to you, you are welcome to the Swedish Winter Challenge, where we teach these things. The next thing we go into is the how, and that toolbox has, in the how, there are many problems you're going to solve. The problem solving happens in the how. And there we use the tool called the root analysis, or 5 whys. We use a force field tool to ask what are the forces working for and against. And we take it then into the action sheet. And often the how is not achieved because of lack of time in the organizational or in the individual. And we then do the time management exercise. And when we are busy with the projects, we get confused with what do we do next? What's more important? And we have a tool called the project ranking tool to help decide the importance of projects or decisions. This is the toolbox really summarized for us, for our coaches. We have 3 minutes, any additions, any questions? Any comments?
Very helpful, Charles. It's so good to have it structured in this graphical way. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Urban.
Thank you, Charles. It's good to have the full view of that. One of the things that I remember you saying over and over the years is trust the process. And as a coach, if you have this full picture in your head as to where it's going, but you're sitting with a client who only sees the one part of it, whether it's the resistance part of it, that's where they are, that's where they captured. But a secret that you continue to emphasize is trust the process. Even as a coach, continue to trust the process, because the process will take you somewhere.
Thank you. Good. Well, I don't know if there are any comments typed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it's amazing to see how you could put all that on one page, and it's really a lot of information, life-changing information. And even if we've already learned that several times in the winter challenge, it's still such a great revelation to see everything that you've put up there. So thank you very much for this great summary. What I was saying is, with our organization, we give a training for entrepreneurship, and we also give some microloans. And most of the times you see people coming back to tell you all the miseries and how it happened, that they lost the money that they had, and or somebody came and stole their goods, and there's always something. And so I wonder sometimes maybe we don't teach it the right way. I don't know, or maybe there are things that we don't know how to transmit to maybe we need to learn how to transmit this information to the people that come to us. Some of them didn't go to school, some of them are illiterate, but they still need to live. They need to start a small business, and we are working as their mentors, even if they don't pay us for that. God has given us the knowledge, and we are in a possibility to help them. So we try to do what we can, but all the time there's something coming up, and it's really not easy. And sometimes us as teachers, as coaches or mentors, we can even feel like we are discouraged, because we are trying to get people from a place to a place, from a point A to a point B, but it seems like there's something that is not happening the way we so much want it. So I don't want to cry or whine, but I just wanted to put it out there, and if you have any other ideas, it's always a good thing. Thank you very much.
It's been our privilege to journey with you, Nabenta, and the work you're doing in DRC with entrepreneurship and teaching and education. You've got my vote for the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah. I just like to add, I was just reminded when I saw the picture of the need of perseverance. I'm thinking of Hebrew, what the author of Hebrew says, that we need perseverance to get what God has promised for us, and that is kind of the vision, what is in the where, and it takes time, and we have already touched on it, that it's a growing into the where. So we need to encourage each other not to give up, but to persevere. Yeah, it takes time, and sometimes that might be what we need to convey to the client as well. This is not a quick fix. It's something that takes time.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Sorry, last thing. I think it's important to celebrate the little things that do work. It's actually to list them and remind yourself about the instances or the occasions where, you know, someone got a grant and they kind of connected things and to make it work. And because, you know, I think the biggest concern is that as soon as, you know, where you deal with a barrage of those kind of things, that it leads to apathy. And guard your heart in that, and bring those things before God, and celebrate the things that did work. And
I love that. Thank you, Rudy. We don't celebrate enough. COVID has robbed us from celebrating. But I'm going to see Rudy soon, and we're going to celebrate. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Some had to leave already. Their lunchtime is up. With daylight saving, some snuck in for their lunch and had to leave. But thank you for taking this time out. We have once a month, we have these master classes, and it's just to sharpen our tools, to learn together. And the focus of the last few months have been on our focus on righteousness and what does that mean, and how do we apply the tools to that. And Audrey and Bram are helping me with using this model. How do we design a model that is a righteous model that turns the world the right way up? So, you know, most people want to turn the world upside down. We want to turn it righteously up. So let's keep looking up and have an awesome week further. Thank you for joining us.